I feel like I need to redeem myself. I've realized recently that in many of my videos where I talk about books, I have mentioned several really bad book to movie adaptations. So today I'm putting a positive spin on it and I'll be talking about great book to movie adaptations. There are so many movies out there that I have decided to give myself a couple of criteria. So, criteria number one is that all the movies I'm talking about are based on classic books. Number two is that the movie must be so good that I don't feel the urge to read the book. Now, before you say anything, I know, and I agree with you. 90% of the time, the book will always be better than a movie. However, in this list, I wanted to highlight the movies that personally have stayed with me since I watched them in a way that is satisfying, and so it doesn't make me feel like I immediately need to read that book. So, starting with number one, in no particular order, we've got The Birds from 1963, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. He based the movie on a short story by Daphne du Maurier from 1952 with the same title, The Birds. This movie starts as a romantic comedy but turns into a natural, I don't want to say horror because I think in a horror you have to have supernatural elements, but there's nothing supernatural in this movie. It's the nature itself that becomes this scary key character of the movie. We've got this rise of nature against humans who take it for granted and underestimate the power of nature. I think that the philosophical questions in this movie about the relationship between humans and nature are just as valid today, if not more valid today, as they were in 1963. I think this is Hitchcock's masterpiece, where he took a short story and turned it into a piece of art with minimum dialogue and no music, which was a very much deliberate decision on part of Hitchcock. By the way, Daphne du Maurier was inspired to write this story because as she was living in Cornwall, she was one day watching this tractor plowing a field and she saw this tractor being surrounded by a huge group of screaming birds. And she thought to herself, well, I wonder what would happen if these birds lost interest in worms. I understand that the ending in the short story by Daphne du Maurier is different. I do love the ending in the movie and that it doesn't really give us any specific answers. I think it makes the movie almost more chilling. And again, this was a deliberate decision by Hitchcock, who specifically requested that at the end of the movie in cinemas, when the movie was being screened, there was no the end card. And so this left the audience not really understanding that the movie was over. Very much a calculated move on the part of Hitchcock, who wanted for his audience to feel their emotions in that sort of open, endless way. At number two, we have 12 Years a Slave, a movie from 2013 based on a book dating 1853. This is based on facts because the movie was based on a book which was a memoir by Solomon Northup of the events that really took place in his life in the United States just before the Civil War. He was born free in the state of New York, but later he was kidnapped and sold into slavery into a cotton plantation in Louisiana and was not rescued until 12 years later. This movie lives in me to this day. I watched it probably 10 years ago now, and I still regularly think about it. And to this day, the memory of some of the scenes from that movie still completely horrify me. Oh, some of the scenes, they will live with me forever. What a powerful adaptation of the book. Number three, Dangerous Liaisons. This is the version from 1988 starring John Malkovich, Glenn Close and Michelle Pfeiffer. The movie is based on a book from 1782 by Delaclos and it is set in France, pre-revolution France, where we follow two aristocrats who, out of pure boredom, embark on this game of playing with other people's feelings, game of manipulation, seduction, and revenge. Tell me that movie is not a perfection. John Malkovich, one of my favorite actors ever. I think he just did such a stunning job on this. Only he could best present to us that transcendent chillingness and creepiness. And also Michelle Pfeiffer, she was brilliant in it. I am so glad she said no to another movie that was being made at around the same time, also based on the same book, which was titled Valmont, which is the name of the main key character, one of the two aristocrats I've mentioned. Brilliant, brilliant adaptation. It left me feeling like, honestly, the book can wait. Speaking of John Malkovich, we're moving on to number 4, and at number 4 we have Les Miserables. This is the adaptation from 2000 with Gerard Depardieu playing the key role. And actually, I'm not sure if it's technically a movie because it was done in 2 parts. The movie is based on a book by Victor Hugo from 1862, and this is one of those books that is really loved by many, and it is often cited as one of their favorite classics. So I don't want you to be mad at me when I say that having watched that adaptation, having also watched the musical here in West End in London, I feel completely satisfied and I don't feel the need to put the book on my priority list. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings. I just thought Gerard Depardieu was fantastic in that adaptation, but also I must say I don't feel like the whole story and the plot, even though it is captivating, necessarily aligned with what I normally like to read. I don't know, it just doesn't pull me in the same way as other stories may. Number 5, we have Great Expectations, based on a book by Charles Dickens of the same title. The book was first published in a weekly newspaper in 1860, and then it was published as a book in 1861. The adaptation I'm talking about is from 1998, and it's the one with Ethan Hawke and Gwyneth Paltrow and Robert De Niro. But also it has Anne Bancroft, who is more known for her role as Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate, playing the equivalent character to Miss Havenshaw, although I think in the movie she is called something different. And I thought she was fantastic in it. For some reason, even though Pip is the main character of the movie, again, I think he is called something different in this particular adaptation. So yes, even though Pip was the main character, or was supposed to be the main character, for some reason, the most vivid characters that have stayed in my mind are the 2 women, especially Miss Havenshaw and Robert De Niro. I think it's a testimony to his fantastic acting because the very few scenes that he's actually in are extremely impressive. I loved that movie, I think mainly because I loved the premise of the book and the story itself, which I know we have Dickens to thank for and not the movie director. Dickens was first, right? But now that I have watched the movie and I know the story, and maybe that was my mistake, I shouldn't have done it in this order. For some reason, the book doesn't hold the same excitement for me. I actually do have a copy in my house and I do plan to read it at some point. It's slightly lower on my priority list. Next, we have a movie that I only just saw last year, and my goodness, this movie is gorgeous. It is based on Thomas Hardy's novel of the same title, Far from the Madding Crowd. The book was published in 1874, and the movie adaptation I'm talking about is dated 2015. This is the one with Carey Mulligan, who did an amazing job. She is such an understated and maybe underestimated actress. And Matthias Schoenaerts, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I know that you know who I'm talking about. I still think about this movie. In case you haven't seen it and you haven't read the book, we follow Bathsheba, who is this very independent, but at the same time vulnerable woman living in rural England. And I'm just going to say there are 3 love interests. I don't want to say anymore because I think you have to watch it or maybe read the book if you'd prefer that. I have to guiltily admit that I have not read any of the Thomas Hardy's novels, and I blame all these great movie adaptations for it. This one, but also Tess of the Obervilles from 1979, directed by Polish director Roman Polanski, and that adaptation was also so good. I think I watched it 3 times now. So yes, I think these movies are so brilliant, and I blame them as the reason for me to keep delaying my tete-a-tete with Thomas Hardy. Next is another movie directed by another Polish director. Her name is Agnieszka Holland, and she's the director behind the movie from 1993 titled The Secret Garden, which was based on the book of the same title by Frances Hodgson Burnett, book that was published in 1911. This is a children's fantasy novel which actually could be perfect to rewatch now as we approach the spring. We follow the story of a rich 7-year-old girl who lives in India, but after her parents die, she moves to Yorkshire, England, to live with her very rich widowed uncle. While in Yorkshire, she is very much left to her own devices because her uncle travels a lot. And so on one of her escapades, she discovers this secret garden. She also discovers one night that in the house lives her cousin, a very young, sicklish boy whom she eventually befriends. I think that the movie captured the gothic and the eerie atmosphere so well. I honestly don't know if I will ever feel like reading the book, because I almost want the story to stay in my head as it was presented to me by the director of the movie. Now let's stay in the fantasy world for the moment, because I have to mention The Lord of the Rings. This is a very well-known movie from 2011 based on Tolkien's novel from 1954. I don't think I need to say too much here, because I think most of us have seen it. And because, as far as I am concerned, this is an epic adaptation of the book that left me fully satisfied and not feeling like I have to read the book. I hope I'm not going to catch a lot of grief for this one. This is just my personal opinion, of course. But I do know that this is one of those books that get a lot of younger readers into reading classic books and getting them excited about classics. So I definitely am not saying don't read the book. I'm just saying I won't be reading it. And to my defense, I think one reason is that fantasy is not normally my top genre to reach for. Plus, my other defense is named Viggo Mortensen, who is just amazing. With number 9, we back in the real world with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. This 1958 movie was based on a play by Tennessee Williams from 1955, and I would have included here actually also Streetcar Named Desire, another fantastic adaptation of Tennessee Williams' another play, but I did read that one. Therefore, following my strict criteria, I want to talk about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor star in this movie. Do I have to say more? To me, they both were at their peak performance with this movie. We follow a family who gather for a birthday celebration, and everything seems nice and dandy, but really, this is a family in a serious crisis. There are secrets and deceit, greed, loneliness, depression, death, or fear of death. This movie is to me evidence of how just stunning performances and stunning dialogues can build and build and build on that very thick atmosphere where you feel that tension and you know things bound to blow up. If you haven't watched it yet, please go watch it right now. And finally, at number 10, we have a trio of films and trio of books. You can blame my kids, who are absolutely obsessed with this author and made me watch all 3 movies. I'm talking about, of course, Agatha Christie and the 3 adaptations of her 3 novels. So, Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and Haunting in Venice. Now, I know Haunting in Venice is a bit more loosely based on Agatha Christie novel titled Halloween Party. The settings are completely different, and I believe the perpetrator was also changed in the movie, but I still think it's a very good adaptation. I have read some of Christie's work, but not these particular novels. My favorite adaptation, I think, is Murder on the Orient Express, just because I loved the ending. I'm not gonna spoil it for you. I'm not gonna say anything else. Please go and watch it and you'll know what I'm talking about. With crime mystery novels, because of the twist in the story and finding out who did it is such a key element of those stories that once you know the answer to those questions, then you lose the urge to read the book. In fact, my family and I are booked to see a theatre play here in London based on Agatha Christie's short story Witness for the Prosecution. And unfortunately, this was some years back, but I did read that short story. There's a huge twist. I loved that twist in that story. And now I almost wish I hadn't read it before seeing the play. So yes, if you love Agatha Christie, go and watch those movies. They are really brilliant. So as I'm editing this video, I realized that the end of the video got completely cut off. I have no idea what happened, but I didn't want to go without saying proper goodbye. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little list of mine, and please let me know which classic movies you think are the best, and I'll see you in my next video.